Well, hello. Welcome to a celebration of 60 years of Sounds of Silence, the second album by Simon and Garfunkel, and of course their breakthrough, following of course their breakthrough single released just in September of the previous year, the almost title track, The Sound of Silence, which of course propelled them into the front ranks of the new burgeoning folk rock scene of the day, quite unexpectedly. And as a result, they came together to record album number two very, very swiftly indeed, and the results are what we're listening to today. Well, some of them are, because it's a random foreplay that I'll be doing on this particular album, and that means I throw the entire album on shuffle and I pick best of three, basically. So I'll get three options and pick one of those to listen to and discuss in full, whilst talking about everything on the album and surrounding its creation, etc., along the way, if I remember, of course. So let's kick off with the tune nice and early on and throw the headphones on and see what my first three options are going to be. Let's do it. Okay, so I am, of course, using the US version of the album, which is what I grew up listening to. So it doesn't have Homeward Bound on it as the UK edition did, which means that my final choice is only going to be between two songs, but that's a way off yet. We've got a choice of three to start with, and I'll give you a few seconds of each track. So just to help you along in terms of whether you think I'm making the right choices as we go. So do let me know in the comments which of these you would have chosen after I've chosen what we actually hear. Does that make sense? I hope so. Anyway, track slash option number one is Blessed. Option number two, one of two tracks that opens with the slick. You just got that glimpse of vocal there, so you know that it's not Angie. It is, in fact, Somewhere They Can't Find Me, which was the remake of the title track of the previous album, Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m. And track number three, slash option number three, is that's Kathy's song. Okay, so we have got three interesting ones. None of these are my top tier favorites on this particular album, but they're all good. So what do I go for? Now, there's a little fact on Wikipedia that tells you that the only brand new Paul Simon song on this album was the first option, Blessed. And I mention that because the reason that's even on Wikipedia is due to friend of the channel, Bo Start. So shout out to you, Bo Start. I don't know how much else of that Wikipedia entry is down to him, but at least that bit is. Um, so I'm not going to go with that one, though. I am going to go with the second option, which is, as I say, a remake of the very, very wussy Wednesday Morning 3 a.m., rocked up and hardened up quite considerably to become this Somewhere They Can't Find Me. I can hear. All right. Somewhere They Can't Find Me. Now, if you only heard the opening and closing few seconds of that track, that's because most of the songs have been edited out due to copyright, and there will be a separate link where you can go and listen along with me to the songs in full. That'll be in the description. But for those who are just here to hear what I have to say about the songs, quite a bit on this one because, as I said, this album was thrown together, but curiously, and this is a gap in my Simon Garfunkel chronology knowledge, they recorded two tracks in April of 1965, and this was one of them. And obviously, as you just heard, they've gone full in on electric, upbeat pop rock arrangements, which is a far cry from anything that they had on their debut. And then, of course, Artie went back to college, Paul went to England and recorded Paul Simon Songbook, which I have a 60th anniversary reaction to elsewhere on the channel, which you can find later. Many of the songs on here are, of course, on that album as well, but in very, very different versions. And as I mentioned at the top of this song, this was the closing cut on the debut, Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m., on which it is art, I think, doing the lead vocal and sounding very unconvincing as someone who's held up a hard liquor store, even set foot in one, quite frankly. This improves things a lot. It adds in the chorus, which isn't in the original. It's still not the crime of the century, is it, really? I'm not sure why he has to flee just because he robbed one little store, but oh well. So it goes. And yeah, it's a catchy little number in this version. Not one of the great songs on this album, but it's fun. Now, I don't know who produced it either. Bob Johnston gets the credit on the entire album, but well, we'll get to later, I suspect, a track that he definitely didn't produce. But yeah, we'll see about that when it comes along. We might not go that way because there's going to be some tough choices in amongst the remaining three. So let's get on to my second choice from the next batch of 3 songs. So many numbers. Right, let's see what we've got next. Okay, so option number 1 is there's that familiar opening once more, which means that this time it is the instrumental cover of Davy Graham's Angie. Option 2 this time around will be Leaves That Are Green, which is one of the songs that we did highlight in its Paul Simon Songbook version a few months ago, which leaves us with one more option, which will be We've Got a Groovy Thing Going, which was the other song recorded in April '65 and was actually put out as the B-side of the Sound of Silence single. All right, so out of those 3, I'm going to have to make one of the same choices that I made, as I said, when I looked at the Paul Simon Songbook, because Angie's a nice little instrumental, but there's nothing to say about an instrumental, really, is there? This one, We've Got a Groovy Thing Going, is a real throwaway number. I can't believe Paul let it out, really. But the other one is Leaves That Are Green, which is certainly outside of the big hits that bookend this album, very likely my favourite song here. So let's hear it in harpsichord accompanied version. Again, as I say, very different from Paul's earlier solo version. That when this came out, nobody in America had heard that album, and very few people anywhere had, to be fair. But yeah, the electrified version of Leaves That Agree sounds like this. There we go, Leaves That Are Green. As it had on the original acoustic version, that has a nice proper musical ending, which, as we know, is something I'm always going on about. I do so hate a fade out. But that's actually quite acousticy in itself. It's one of the outliers on this album because it was recorded in December '65 along with the bulk of these songs. As I say, a re-recording, like so many of the tracks here are, from Paul's solo debut that didn't see the light of day in America for decades, really, other than a couple of weeks in 1981, before he pulled it out of circulation. But this is the one song, and I said this on that episode. There's a lot of crossover that I feel both versions are equally strong, and I find it hard to choose a favourite between them. I do love the harpsichord, but the acoustic guitar is nice as well, and the harmonies are not overdone like sometimes they are on some of these songs, maybe. But yeah, that's a good one, and had it been in an era where you released 3 or 4 singles from an album, I'm sure that would have been one to have come out, but of course it wasn't, for reasons we'll get to a little bit later on. All right, so there's 5 songs left, and we're going to hear 2 of them. You can probably guess what they are, but can you? Because if they both come up in the same set, then we can only hear one. We have to make a choice. So let's see if that happens to us about now. Option 1 is Richard Cory, based on the poem by E.A. Robinson, of course. Option 2, another nice acoustic intro to the other big song from this album, I Am a Rock. And option 3 is
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Okay, yeah, it's the sound of silence. So that thing that I just said might happen has happened. And it's, well, I'm going to address Richard Corey first of all. I probably wouldn't have gone for that one no matter what it came up against, simply because I've already got a video up about it where I compare the Simon and Garfunkel version to the version with them featuring Van Morrison. And you will find that elsewhere later on if you so fancy as well. So the sound of silence or I Am a Rock. Well, again, harkening back to the Paul Simon Songbook, I stated there that that version, the solo acoustic version, is to my mind the greatest version of the song ever. Um, yes, even better than the Disturbed cover. um, Maybe not many people agree with that, but that's probably because not many people have heard that version. As we also noted, the Simon and Garfunkel acoustic version is by far the most streamed song or most streamed version of the song. It's over 700 million now, whereas this electric version that broke them through and made them famous in the first place has only got about 45 million streams. So I don't know if that's just a Spotify thing and it's decided that the other one is the definitive version, or if that's what the people have decided and that's what they want to hear. It's sometimes hard to tell, isn't it? But anyway, I will just mention the fact that, of course, that version was put together by Tom Wilson, who produced Wednesday Morning 3 a.m. He was finished working with Dylan and had some time on his hands, so he played around and added electric guitar and bass and drums to it, and the rest is history. But on the album, he didn't get a credit whatsoever. There's not a little asterisk to say, produced by Bob Johnston, apart from The Sound of Silence, produced by Tom Wilson. Nothing. I find that curious, to say the least. Anyway, as you've probably gleaned, I'm not going to play that. I'm going to go with I Am a Rock, which closes the album, but doesn't close today's episode. So here we go. Top 5 single, which, of course, there was another song in between released as a single, but I'll mention that in a bit. All right. I am a rock. Well, actually, I'm not. Yeah, it's an interesting one, that isn't it? It basically follows the formula set down by The Sound of Silence in terms of having been given that little acoustic intro before bringing the full band in. But this time, Simon and Garfunkel themselves were actually involved with that decision. Um, and the result was another top 5 single. But as I said, Homeward Bound came in between them, I believe, and was released on this album in the UK, but was held over for the next album in the US, which, of course, is getting ahead of ourselves slightly. Past the Sage is Merry in Time, which comes out in September, I want to say, or is it October? Something like that. And we might get to that album then as well, probably, maybe. And of course, the solo version was released as a single in the UK and did nothing. And again, I like both versions, but I prefer the solo version. These songs of isolation that Paul was writing at this time really suit a solo interpretation rather than the harmonizing of the duo. The next album, as I say, Passing Sage, would have some material better suited to the pairing vocally, I feel. But yeah, that's just me. As ever, you let me know what you think. Assuming you have thoughts. If you don't have any thoughts at all, that's also fine. All right, we've got one track left, and if you know this album, you know what the choices are. Again, if you know the Paul Simon Songbook, you'll know that both of those originally appeared on that. So we're looking at A Most Peculiar Man or April Come She Will. But let's see what order the randomness of iTunes gives them to me in. April Come She Will comes up first, which of course means that A Most Peculiar Man is the last option on the album. Now, I have a very strong preference here. I was very surprised to see when looking at Spotify stats for this album that April Comes You Will is actually the most streamed song here. I Am a Rock is about 80 million, and April Comes You Will is 120 or so. A Most Peculiar Man, on the other hand, is down not quite 10 million, so, not bad for an album track of this vintage, really. But yeah, not exactly one of those tunes that everybody still remembers, perhaps. So, on that note, why not let us hear it and see what we make of Side 2's second track, which, followed Richard Corey, one song about a guy committing suicide, and here's a song about a guy committing suicide. Cheery stuff, Paul. Thanks, man. All right, here we go. Track 4 and final, A Most Peculiar Man, as presented by me, JSB, also known as A Most Peculiar Man. All points off for ending on a fade out, but there we go with A Most Peculiar Man, which has a very similar sound to Leaves the Green on this album, barring the harpsichord. I think they could have brought the harpsichord back for this one. This was actually the very last song recorded for the album, according to Wikipedia anyway. And, I'm assuming that the information is right, because when have you ever read information on the internet that's even slightly wrong? Yeah. But I'm assuming there's enough people out there who would know and would correct these things if they were. That said, I see that it does specifically state that Bob Johnston produced everything, and you know what I just said about that not really being the case. So, anyhow, yeah, another example for me of a song that works better without harmonies. I love a good harmony, I do, but sometimes subject matter doesn't really lend itself to it, and that's what I feel with some of these songs, and that's one of them. And for people who don't know, I'm generally quite averse to Garfunkel most of the time. I generally prefer Paul on his own. I was going to add something to that, but I don't really need to. I generally just prefer Paul on his own. Again, most people don't, and that's fine. But I have been listening to this album and the next album and Bridge Over Troubled Water and the Paul Simon Songbook all my life. And yeah, I formed that opinion that I like Paul's solo better quite early on, and I've never been able to shake it. Yeah, Sounds of Silence at 60. What do you make of it? Do you think they did a good job of throwing an album together quickly? Because I think they did, despite some of my criticisms of it. I think in the short time that they had to pull something together, they did a fantastic job, especially in the context of the general album quality at the time, especially on Columbia, who liked, if you had a hit single, they'd just get you in the studio to record a bunch of generic covers, like what would happen to Gary Puckett and Union Gap, or Paul Revere and the Raiders, people like that. So thankfully, they at least let Paul write the songs or just re-record songs he had already written, and the results are decent. They would, of course, come up with much better, including on that next album, where they had a bit more time. Well, actually, a lot more time than this, but then they would go to extreme lengths in later albums, Bookends and obviously Bridge Over Troubled Water, to use ample studio time, shall we say. And on one of those occasions it worked and was justified, and on the other, maybe not so much. I'm not talking about either of those, and you'll just have to surmise which one I mean each way around. It's probably not obvious, because most people love both of those albums. Anyhow, that's me. That's 60 years of Sounds of Silence sewn up, and that's alliteration for you, and a bit of a lift. I don't know why I'm lifting, so yeah. Honestly, if January was a busier month of releases, this probably wouldn't have made the grade in terms of a re-evaluation, but it's not a popular month for releases, so it has, and it was still worth it. And I'm still hoping to get Bostart back on the channel to do another 1966 January release for Mr. Gordon Lightfoot's debut. So that will either happen next week or it won't happen at all. Those are pretty much the only options. So, yeah. Meanwhile, as I say, there's a discussion of the Paul Simon Songbook and 4 songs from that floating around. There's that Richard Cory versus Richard Cory song battle, or song war as I like to call them, and plenty of other stuff to check out and share your opinions on, or find something new and exciting to hear with me. So do hit the big pretty purple logo to subscribe to the channel for all of what's to come. And I will simply say thanks for watching today and bye for now, but not, I hope, for long.
It's the end, but the moment has been prepared for.